Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad to be joined by Governor Lamont and Secretary Melissa McCall this morning to announce my decision with respect to allocating the excess funds in the Budget Reserve Fund. Despite the ongoing challenges from the pandemic and the tough road ahead, this morning is about sharing a bit of good news, something we could all use in our state. Due to smart policy and fiscal discipline in recent years, Connecticut has built our rainy day fund to an historic high at just over $3 billion. This is a significant milestone for the state, a first, which has resulted in excess funds being available to the Budget Reserve Fund. Whenever the amount in the reserve fund exceeds 15% of the net general fund appropriations, which has never happened before, the excess is to be transferred to one of the state's pension funds, either the teachers or state employees. We have exceeded the 15%, and the excess will be transferred to the state employees' retirement system. That amount is approximately $61.6 million. It's being transferred there because SERS, as it's called, has the most significant unfunded status. And this is great news, and I'm thrilled that it's possible. Connecticut's issues regarding our pension liabilities are well known, and within our first month in office, the governor, the secretary, and I got to work in addressing some of the challenges with our teachers' pension fund. We reduced the assumed rate of return there from 8% to a much more conservative 6.9%, re-amortized over 30 years, the funding. In the first 5 years, which is proving to be very valuable right now, there was $900 million in savings in that first 5 years, and we've worked tirelessly as a team to protect our rainy day fund for a rainy day, which we are in. And so us standing here today is a testament to that teamwork, and not just the three of us, but to the efforts of legislators in this building taking appropriate financially responsible decisions around our rainy day fund, and that brings us to where we are now. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you, Governor, thank you, Secretary, for being such great partners in this work, and I will introduce our Secretary of the Office of Policy and Management, Melissa McCall. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you today. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and thank you, Governor Lamont, for the opportunity to be here today on a very historic moment for the state of Connecticut. If we were to look back just over 10 years ago during the Great Recession, Connecticut had completely exhausted its budget reserve fund, and the state had to borrow nearly $1 billion just to meet its operating expenses. But to the credit of legislators in this building, with the implementation of the volatility cap in 2018, strong investment returns for our taxpayers, we have begun to build our budget reserve fund over many years. And that includes the fact that we have exceeded, for the first time in Connecticut's history, the 15% volatility cap threshold that allows us and makes it possible today, as Treasurer Wooden indicated, to make a historic deposit and payment on the SERS unfunded liability. This is the first time in Connecticut's history that we've ever been able to make a deposit to pay down unfunded liability above and beyond our normal annual payments. And so today, I'm very pleased that we were able to close the fiscal year in strong standing. I have to give credit to the great fiscal stewardship of Governor-led Lamont, who always keeps us honest in pushing us to take all steps to achieve fiscal due diligence while honoring the needs of the residents of the state of Connecticut. It is the combination of the strong actions by legislators in this building, the fiscal stewardship of Governor Lamont, the strong investment decisions by our state treasurer, as well as the aid that we received from the federal government that allowed Connecticut to be in this place today. And so today is a moment to celebrate, and I hope that, and I believe that the state employees and the taxpayers of Connecticut ought to be very proud. And so finally, Mr. Treasurer, I applaud you on your decision to apply the payment to our lower funded state employee pension system. The work that we've begun under this administration to continue to push for fiscal sustainability is certainly demonstrating returns on that investment, and we will continue to push forward under Governor Lamont's leadership. Thank you, and with that, I give you the Governor of the State of Connecticut, Ned Lamont.
All right, thank you, Sean and Melissa, and your good work. This really is important, and let me try and say why. I've said for some time, in the near term, Connecticut's in relatively good shape in the middle of this pandemic compared to our peers, in part because due to the fortitude of the people behind me, we kept our rainy day fund intact, and we have 15% reserves set aside. So no matter how dysfunctional Washington is, we have some control over our own future going forward, and that makes a difference for the near term. But as you also know, we have some work to do in the long term. And that's because Connecticut continues to have more debt per person than almost any state in the country. And when I say debt, that means bonded debt, that means pensions, which is pension debt, and also unfunded health care obligations. Kevin Lembo is working really well on the unfunded health care, trying to bring down those costs, as well as some increased contributions from employees, beginning to get a handle on that. You know, Melissa, Sean, and I working in terms of how much we borrow. We just had our bond commission meeting, bringing that down to something more supportable so that we don't have those same long-term obligations that can really drag down a budget. And today we're here to talk about pension, our long-term pension obligations. And you know, as Sean would say, look, it's $60 million. So we have pension obligations going out in the tens of billions of dollars, but it's directional, and that's really important. For a state that's done nothing but kick the can down the road and borrow and expect the next governor to pay for it, we're making a down payment today, $60 million down payment on your pension, retiring some of that pension debt going forward. And that's on top of a lot of the good work that you know, Treasurer Wooden has been doing, and his predecessor, I might add. You know, going back generations, we just shortchanged the pension. First, it was pay as you go, meaning I'll promise you a big benefit, my successor or his successor will pay for it. We stopped doing that. We started making partial payments to the pension fund. Then we started making the fuller payments to the pension fund, ARC, just to bring it closer to where we have to be so that it's in balance. And over the last 10 years, really in part thanks to Governor Malloy, we've made full payments to that pension fund for the first time, I think, ever. And now with Sean Wooden, he said, hey, look, we had some very rich assumptions in terms of what our rate of return is going to be. He made those assumptions more conservative, which means we have to contribute a little bit more, but more certainty for our teachers and state employees that we're going to have a pension there that they deserve and when they retire going forward. Also say that the Tier 4, we also have state employees contributing a little more to the pension as well. So every day, I think we're making a difference in terms of where we ought to be to get our pension house in order. Is this an overnight program? No. Is $60 million as a pay down a start? Yes. Is fully funding our pension obligations on an annual basis a difference? Yes. Do the financial markets around the country pay attention to this? You bet they do. This may sound a little complicated, but it means that Sean Wooden can borrow money at less cost because people say Connecticut is slowly getting its fiscal house in order. That means that we pay less interest. That means you have to pay less taxes to subsidize that interest. It also means that people are taking a second look at our great state as a place they want to live, a place that's getting its fiscal house in order. So, all right, for the first time ever, we're putting in $60 million to start retiring debt. It's a small down payment, but directionally it's really important, and that's why we're here today. Thank you.
So, I'm happy to take any questions.
How much will this small down payment reduce our long-term
it's a $60 million reduction in the unfunded liability. When you think about how it impacts our state budget, a $60 million payment to the unfunded liability will yield about $5 million annually in savings over the 25-year period. So each year, $5 million. As we approach next year's fiscal challenges, well, we have $5 million of savings already because of this down payment.
So to say the argument, the first cut budget that reduced the contribution by $5 million.
Your question?
Well, I mean, the downside, it seems that every time the state does something sensible with pension, on the flip side is the legislature sometimes says we don't have to contribute as much.
We don't have the ability to do that because of the CBAC 2017 agreement, whereby we committed to, over a 5-year period, phasing up to the annual required contribution. So our contracts prohibit us from, current contracts prohibit us from reducing that annual amount.
And I guess I should say, although it's easy, I guess what I'm really asking is, what's the context that this is new to you, but the governor from time to time, when he talks about COVID numbers, he also usually ends with a warning. So what's the warning you would give about what this means and what it doesn't mean about sort of the state of
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, as the governor indicated, Connecticut still has its challenges. We are, heavily carry heavy debt. On a positive note, you have to recall that we have the highest rainy day fund, about 7th or 8th in the nation. You can't report to me any other state that is reporting that they're making a down payment on pension in the midst of, coronavirus pandemic, the hit on their revenues, and the economic impact they're feeling throughout the state. So I think it's important to note that even in the midst of our challenges, there is a silver lining, which suggests that the decisions that have been made in past have helped position us to meet the challenges that lie ahead. So it's a mixed bag. Treasurer?
Yeah, and let me, and I fully appreciate your question, Mark. And whenever I feel like it's important for whenever we say something good that's happening, and it's important to do that because we need to recognize that when you make tough, smart financial decisions that are sometimes hard to get through this building, that we need to see the results of that, and that's what we're seeing today. Two, with respect to that $5 million annually, as the Secretary has pointed out, that is not going to come off of the backside where you reduce the state's annual contribution amount. So that is on top of what the state will continue to make into contributions into the fund. And to underscore, this is about a different direction. And we have to recognize that the steps that we're taking are changing the fiscal trajectory of our state. The governor made reference to our credit rating and borrowing. This may seem small here, but for the work I do every day in dealing with investors and rating agencies, this is significant. They are noticing. And again, it's directionally. We are, I think the number is right, one of 7 states in this neighborhood around the 15% mark. So we are at the top, right? This has been reported by Moody's and others. Not that I wouldn't think you just believe me, but additionally, in year one, or last year, the year one of us coming into office, for the first time in 18 years, following the debt diet announcement, following the restructuring of the teachers' pension fund, S&P, they upgraded the state's outlook to positive for the first time in 18 years. This year, we've had no less than 3 rating agencies in the midst of the pandemic hold our outlook as stable. These are all very significant accomplishments and very different from what's happening in the rest of the country. And so I think that's the message of today.
Could you and the governor speak to, because I'm sure it's going to come up, there was debate in the last election, as you recall, about whether or not the state could just cancel these pensions. Just, sorry, we can't afford it. We want to go to court, let's go to court, we'll fight it out. We think we win, we've got all court cases that we can support our position. You, on the other hand, said, no, I don't think so, and cited, and not dispute, cited other court decisions that indicate the contrary. So
it has been my long-held view, very publicly, that with respect to benefits that have vested, that you cannot simply wipe them out. That is our reality. From my perspective, this problem has taken, it's been 70 years in the making, and we're on a path now to, maybe for the teachers, it'll be 30 years till full funding, or 29 or so, but it takes time. We are on that path now, in that right direction, making changes. The bulk of the outstanding unfunded liability is associated with employees that are long gone. You start work in Connecticut today, your plan is very different from the plans that were in place that built up that significant unfunded liability. And so we are taking those steps.
Yeah, no, I think Sean said it well. Paul, look, during a campaign, talk is cheap. Now, let's tear up all the contracts. Let's walk on it. Let's see what happens. And let me tell you, there would be every attorney in this country would love to get on the other side of that type of a lawsuit. And as Sean correctly pointed out, almost all of our pension liability is related to folks who have retired. These are 75-year-old teachers who put in 25 years. So not only is there a legal argument, it's a moral argument that we made a commitment to these people. What does that mean going forward? Are we getting our house in order? Yes. Do you do it by tearing up contracts on the backs of people who have retired? No. You're right. I mean, we have upticked from a little less than 1% to a little more than 1%, and 1.8 over the last couple of days. And I watched that carefully. I'll tell you, the metric I look at most ferociously right now is New York City, because I remember what happened in New York City going back 6 months ago, and they've got communities there that are at 6, 7, 8%. And I hope that's not a canary in the coal mine, because we are part of that same ecosystem. But that said, right now I don't see that. Schools, I don't think, are impacting our infection rate. Universities, we've got that relatively under control. I think our restaurants have been very careful. So at this point, I don't see any reason to change course. I think we are, Christine. You saw what we did in Danbury and now Norwich. What we do in Danbury and in Norwich, we're going to bring in the cavalry. That means doing extensive testing and track and trace, do everything we can to track where this is coming from and see how we can quarantine it and hold it at bay. And I think you're going to see a lot of action on that right now. I would think so, but let me get back to you on that. Well, I don't need any lectures on debt from either side of the aisle. Let's face it, a Republican plan for transportation was just borrow, 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 and crowd out things like schools. In terms of where the Norwalk School is in the process, I've got to report back to you on that.
Well, it's a shortcut. It's one of those items in a bill that starts with the magic words, notwithstanding any... I think
Melissa, why don't you help me with that?
Okay,
Notwithstanding my knowledge of the subject.
Notwithstanding what the governor just reported, look, obviously that debate is going to continue in the legislature. Senator Duff, being second in command of the Senate, will continue to press for the priorities of his district. There is still a process that will have to occur through the Office of School Construction and Grants Review in the submission of ed specs and ensuring that that there is a need and that any building complies with the educational plan and is cost effective, and that is a very detailed process. Obviously, there are pressing needs in Norwalk that the senator felt were critical and should be moved forward as expeditiously as possible. And we believe that conversation will continue in the chamber between both sides, both parties, and we'll see how the outcome unfolds. I love that question. Thank you for asking it, Christine, and I hope your daughter's well. So that I would love to clarify, because the school priority list bill is a priority list. It is not authorizing, it's not providing new bond authorizations. They are projects, authorizing projects. So when the legislature took action on the bond bill, they included, I believe, $500 million for school construction bonding, and as those projects unfold, we work within that bond authorization. So technically, the bill that's being considered in the legislature does not directly authorize new bonds. As the projects and the cash flow plans are updated on an annual basis, the Office of School Construction Grants Review will make a recommendation to OPM as to whether or not additional bond authorizations are required. Over the past 10 years, that office has significantly reduced the amount of bonding in school construction as they've been running those projects more efficiently. So we still believe that we can continue to live within the annual $500 million, but that was a misconception that there is actually bond authorizations in the bill. That's not the case.
Yeah, I'd like to, salute the legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle coming forward with a package that's going to hold the utilities accountable. It follows what we've been talking about for some time, which is performance-based regulation, that you no longer get 9.5% for showing up. You have to earn it. You have to show performance. One of the metrics is how quickly you can get back to recovery, how quickly you can get back people's power on, and there'll be penalties if you don't. Now it goes over to Pura, now it goes over to Marissa Gillette, and she'll put this into regulation over the next year or so. The question is about airlines laying off workers. I'll say two things. I mean, one, you probably heard JetBlue's announcement that they will be extending flights to the West Coast and Vegas and Cancun. So I think Bradley Airport, I think people are taking a second look at it. A lot less crowded, a little safer. I think people like the idea of being there. And I'm a little cautious about bailing out the airlines, if you want to know the truth. I mean, Sean and Melissa over the last 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, have been building up a rainy day fund in case something untoward happens. You know what the airlines did? They took $50 billion and used it to buy back stock. And now they come to the taxpayers and say, bail me out. So I'd be a little tough there. Anybody here from the airlines? Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.